Hello and welcome to the Folklore Podcast. I'm Mark Norman, folklore researcher and author, and today we welcome back a returning guest onto the podcast. Now, it was back in season 6, episode 92, that we last welcomed musician and composer Einar Selvik onto the show to discuss the musical traditions of the Old Norse, how that music was made, and what it meant to the people of the time. Einar's band, Wardruna, have a new album out, and so when it was suggested that he came back onto the podcast to discuss his latest work, well, how could I refuse? Wardruna's new album is called Birna. That's the she-bear of Old Norse lore, and the music is themed around the animal and her place in nature and folklore. In this wide-ranging interview, Tracy Nicholas talks to Einar about his beliefs, his connections with the land and Norse history, the process of using traditional runes to inspire the musical creation process, and much more around the album and Nordic folk. I hope that you enjoy it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Nicholas, and I am here today with Einar Selvik. And Einar is a musician and composer, and he's composed music for the television show Vikings, the game Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and he also is a lecturer on Old Norse literature, musicology, instruments, and philosophy. He's one of the founders of Wardruna, which is a Nordic folk project that draws inspiration from immersion in nature and the dialogue that takes place between all creatures, forces, and energies that are present here. And Wardruna does not recreate historic music, but rather they create distinctive new sounds that are rooted in some older musical traditions. So welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction and for having me here.
So let's talk a little bit for the readers who are not familiar with you about who you are and what your journey's been to get you to where you are today. And then we'll get into what you're currently working on after that.
Yeah, as you said, my name is Einar Selvik. I come from a small inland island on the west coast of Norway called Osterøy, where I was born and grew up. I've been working with music since I was a child. Was very much especially into drums at first. That was sort of my main instrument for the first period. But one of the things that I realized quite quickly was that I wasn't really fond of playing other people's music, like cover songs and things like that. And so that was a driving force for me to learn how to play other kinds of instruments, so I could create music that I could play my drums to. And at some point I also got like a 4-track cassette player where this was in my early teens, which of course also enabled me to I could create and I could make and play songs without being dependent on other people. So more and more, I guess, on the musical side, my focus switched from like being an instrumentalist on having one main instrument to rather having the like painting the picture was more my my driving my biggest driving force and passion, composing, and so I grew up with lots of different music in my home. A lot of I had siblings who were very much into metal music, which was also sort of my first love in a way, but also a lot of certain types of traditional music resonated with me. Historical music. There was a lot of classical music in my house as well. and I guess all of those things have shaped my my way of thinking music, I guess, and my aesthetics within my own compositions. Even though that's an ongoing journey, of course.
Sure.
I grew up with a lot of stories about history, about saga traditions and those things. I would very often get like the story of what had happened here and here whenever we were around on vacation or just like Sunday trips or whatever. So I guess that sense of place and time is something that has always been there, and I guess I didn't reflect much upon it then, but when I sort of found my own way into my own way and interest for history and Old Norse history traditions, especially the esoteric parts of it. I realized that a lot of these stories and images in my head, they had stuck. They had stayed there since childhood and created this bond, I guess, to the land and landscape and my imagination and sense of history and roots. I worked in several different musical projects up until my like 20s, but then I guess the need, because the metal thing was sort of out of my system, even though I was playing in various metal bands at the time, but the need to do something that was more in line with my own personal interest and passion, that became stronger and stronger. And also I had this vision of, I guess, created out of a void of there being music like this, but I out of that void came the what became Wardruna, which is as you said, a project that well, I guess my vision was to interpret these certain parts of the Old Norse history and culture and traditions in a new way, but using relevant instrumentation, sounds. Let the theme sort of decide all of those things, where I record, when I record, what state I'm in when I'm recording, specific dates, specific time of years or weather, anything and everything, whatever it takes to take to get as close as possible to whatever it is that I'm trying to express through a song.
Sure.
So and that work started in the early 2000s. I think the first recording I did for Wardruna was in 2002, and I spent, the album didn't come out, the first album didn't come out until 2009. So those 7 years were spent doing a lot of research. At that point, there wasn't a lot of people who knew much about many of these historical instruments that we are using today. Perhaps a handful of people at that point. Some of them I could have people build for me. Others I had to build myself. So it was a long process of trial and error and finding the right recipe, I guess, to expressing how I envisioned it.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, obviously your musical background is very diverse, which I think is really fascinating. But it also, when you're talking about kind of connecting to the landscape, it's more than just those stories that you were hearing and more than just, what the history is. You're also your music, from what I understand, is about sort of the relationship that man has with nature itself, not
Yeah.
just sort of the history of a different place or and a different time. And
Mm.
so, can you talk a little bit about how your belief system fits into helping you create your music?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I know a lot of people, since our music has been featured on Vikings and so on. A lot of people think our music is about Vikings, which it's not. It uses, of course, things and elements that definitely was present at the time of Vikings. But I would say if you boil it down to essence, our music is about man's relationship to nature,
Mhm.
to each other, and to something that is bigger than yourself, whatever that may be. Whether it doesn't have to be a spiritual thing, it can be a philosophical thing or an attitude or whatever. So I guess the approach is very much animistic, as is the themes. I'm sort of the traditions I'm giving voice to as well has very much an animistic origin, and for me that has been important. Like you said in your intro, it has never been about recreating music from a specific time. Um, it's more about nature shapes culture. That is how a culture is sort of given its form. That is by the landscape, the resources there, how you have to live, etc. And of course, uh, that's why so many of these things still speak to us, because they are born out of the very ground we're still walking on.
Mhm.
And so I guess that is my focus, to give voice to the things from the past that still resonate today, still has a place here because it's just as relevant uh, today. And I guess the I don't like preaching, but if there is like a one set of um, one idea that is sort of always present in whatever we do, it is this idea or thought, which is of course at the heart of animism,
Uh-huh.
that nature is sacred,
Mhm.
that nature is something you're part of,
Right, right.
and I guess and that doesn't really have to be a spiritual thing either. It can be an attitude that, if that it would be what we teach our children, imagine the ripples it would create. Um, uh, just that simple yet powerful
Well,
idea or attitude.
sure. And
Um,
I mean, so many of us live in cities and it's easy to get disconnected and not remember that we really are part of nature. And so being able to be reminded of that,
yeah,
because I think that the earth itself has a certain resonance to it. So when you're trying to draw inspiration, how do you do that? How do you sort of get out and figure out where you're going to go next with your music?
well, that inspiration can come from many different. Uh, it can take many forms and come from different directions. Sometimes the theme itself is has such a, I don't know, powerful sound to it or vision of it that I just hear hear how it would sound in a way. Perhaps weird for sounds perhaps weird, but I don't know. That's how I work. Sometimes it can be like the instrument or a certain melody that evokes the rest of a song, or sometimes it's poetry. And very often, I would say my main muse that I've always been had a very active relationship to is walking. That is very often when I hear music or solve my problems or clear my thoughts. Walking and talking is also a very good, often very good conversations when you're in movement. It frees the mind in a way, in a very good way, creatively. So that is a method I'm actively using as well. So yeah, it can have many sort of paths to leading up to a song.
So looking at kind of the journey, and this is your 6th album that's coming out just now.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk about the arc of your music over the entire course of this experience with these musicians that you're working with, and like what each of the albums were about and kind of how you progressed to get to where you are, and then we can talk about your current project.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, so when I started Wardruna, the first thing I wanted to do is to I worked with the runes, creating music to runes, and I chose to use the oldest ones we have in Scandinavia, the Proto-Scandinavian runes, the 24 set of runes, divided into 3 albums. The first one was called Gapvar Ginnunga, referring to the gap of creation from the old mythology, and sort of apart from interpreting each runes into a sonic piece, and of course the theme would be the rune itself. There was a sort of the red storyline that went through that album was creation. It was about sowing a seed in a way, and then the second part of the trilogy was named after the tree of life in Old Norse mythology, Yggdrasil, and and the same goes there. Apart from the set of 8 runes that was featured on the album, the red line was about strengthening the roots of the seed, giving it energy, strengthening it, and then the third part of the trilogy was named after the probably a very famous word in Old Norse mythology, Ragnarok, which is the shift, the end and the beginning of a cycle. So that the red line, the thread around going through that album was very much death and rebirth. What happens after the ashes have fallen, and the sprout stretching towards the sun, in a sense, the transformation of the seed. So and those 3 albums that took me 15 years to do, which is a pretty massive and all-consuming thing to be so dived into one project for 15 years. That was that it cost a lot, and it was of course a very I learned a lot on so many levels from that process. And then so during that time period, I had also both been working on the TV show Vikings, but I was also giving more and more lectures. And one of the things that I started to do in my lectures was to do fully acoustic or more skaldic stripped down versions of some of the songs, both that I had created for the TV show Vikings, but also for Wardruna songs. And so after I was done with the trilogy, that was sort of what I wanted to do next, to record some of these acoustic songs into an album called Skald. And Skald, that is sort of the bard in Old Norse society. Of course, they were more than just poets. They were sort of the news forecasters, the genealogists, the seers. They had many different roles apart from just being a singer and a storyteller. So that and then we created an album called Kvitravn, meaning the White Raven, okay. Which I guess continued where the trilogy ended conceptually. But I would say it dealt more with the human sphere of things, as well as dealing with certain animistic world views and ways of defining human aspects of how one define certain things in earlier times.
What does the White Raven represent?
Well, it represents different things in different cultures, but it is sort of this mythic creature that you find it in Native American, several Native American myths and traditions, where it's seen as sort of a pretty good omen. The return of the White Raven brings enlightenment, and so on. So one of the things this album does, that it sort of deals with this idea of these sacred white animals, and that is a common thing all over the planet, whether it's white elephants or lions or serpents or ravens, etc. Moose or elk, they are also coming. The white ones have sort of they come with omens, very often good omens, or they are seen as messengers from the other side. So that is one of the things we're dealing with on this album. Of course, the raven is a very central animal in the north here. I would say if we ever had a totem here, it would for sure be the raven, and it is sort of seen as the human, the animal manifestation of the human mind or memory, personified in nature. Sort of the human in nature, one could say. Also, of course, they are related to the other side because they they are scavengers that eat the dead, or sort of bring the dead over. They carry the dead, and connected to some of these sacred mountains, which of course are related to death. Some of them have names carrying the raven names, basically. Some of these hills or mountains. So yeah, it's many different things, I guess. Not only the perspective on this was not only solely yes, many of these themes are pretty global.
Well, yeah, you said to me that you, in a lot of ways, you create music for yourself that you want to hear that isn't out there. And
absolutely.
And you said that, you thought maybe some people would think it was strange or weird, but it really resonates with people on a deeply emotional level across many cultures, across all cultures.
Yeah. In the beginning, I thought it would be too weird for people. But yeah, I remember when I showed it to the first people I showed it to, like some close friends or a few people in the music industry, and some family, and they all reacted really strongly to it, which of course indicated that okay, there are more people than me feeling this void for music like this. And I guess well, what you see when you study, I would say both the themes we're working with, but also the ethnomusicological parts of it, the instruments, the tonalities, the rhythms. When you go far enough back in time, you see how similar all of these are, all across the planet. It's almost like it's so global and so ancient that it's almost like it's in our DNA. And of course, going back to what I said before, that nature creates culture. Right. So it is born out of the mechanism is the same, creating culture, whether it's in South America or in Norway or in Northern Africa. It's the same mechanism. And I guess this is how nature speaks to us.
Sure.
How we are sort of coded. There are certain things, that certain elements you find absolutely in music tradition over the whole planet. Certain elements.
Well, it was interesting because as I was listening, there were a couple of songs where I felt like some of the vocals had a very kind of keening quality to them that you hear in a lot of Indian music. And in that context, it of course represents, the suffering that those people have gone through. And that's, it's being expressed in some ways through that kind of music. And that's why those vocals have that sound of like people crying and mourning. And I heard some of those same kinds of sounds. And of course, every people have suffered, right? And so, just bringing those kind of common emotions and experiences together, as I was listening through everything, and I listened like straight through all at once, which was a really fun experience to listen to the current work that you have. And just all of the different layers of music and the different, sometimes it would be very simple, just like a stringed instrument that was being plucked, or, a voice chanting, and then it would layer and layer and layer. And I thought that was really exciting as I was going through.
Yeah, I do feel this, I guess, all the album, but especially this one, it makes a lot of sense to listen to it as a whole, because it is sort of it is very much especially the 7 first songs, they are very much linked to each other, almost as a story, and linked to the theme surrounding bears. And they borrow from each other in a way, almost like classical music or a symphony does. It lends from the various parts lent from each other, both when it comes to the poetry as well as the certain musical themes. They shine on their own, but when they're put into their context, it makes more sense.
Let's talk a little bit about the theme. You said it's the bear.
Yeah. So the new album is called Birna, and Birna means she bear in Old Norse tongue. And researching this album, I of course dove into all sorts of literature regarding the man-bear relation throughout, in a historical perspective, but also a lot of scientific literature about the bears themselves. And the more I read, the more I understood that I really wanted the album to have a sort of a contemporary focus as the leading factor. I'd rather, because to be honest, a lot of these, the relation between man and bear has been an entangled one, slightly problematic at times, even though there are traditions that are really beautiful as well, or have really beautiful elements in our relation to them. They seem very distant, and so I'd rather, and this reflects how we work with all sorts of things from the past. It is those things that still resonate, and here I felt that a lot of these old traditions, they don't really resonate that much. So I'd rather stay here and now and contemplate on what it is about the bear that creates all of these stories and myths wherever there are bears. There are so many, they are so central to the mythology, to the totemic traditions. They have star signs, they you name it. They are very central figures, and so I'd rather stay here and now and think what it is that created these things in the first place. And of course, one of the things I personally think is perhaps the main reason is that how you see the annual rhythm or cycle of the bear completely mirrors that of Mother Earth. How the shifting of the seasons, and how the long winter sleep, and and basically that is what the story I wanted to tell. Of course, in a poetic way, but that is sort of the story arch is just following this the cycle of the year, basically through the aspect of, or eyes, or main focus being on the bear, but also of course a lot of these other cyclic events that occurs simultaneously as the one with the bear. Like we have the salmon swimming upstream to the place it was born to spawn and die. Sure. There are so many beautiful poetic images and these cyclic movements of the earth. This is also why I chose Birna, the she bear, rather than just bear, because I felt I could tell the story in a more powerful way, linking it even more so to Mother Earth, and that cycle with the mother bear. The same way, the way I see it is that during winter solstice, that's when the summer is born. And that's the mother bear also gives birth to her cubs during the winter sleep as well, during hibernation, which is a kind of a beautiful thing in itself. but anyway, this is sort of the my starting point of this album, the story arc.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because we have a lot of folklore around different times of the year. And so connecting it that way helps us remember that we are connected to the earth, because so often now we've got, all our modern conveniences, and we can be warm in the winter and all of that. And I do see a strong connection. We even have, phrases for it, like with a bear. It's, we call it mama bear when, a parent is protecting their child, and
Yeah.
they take on that energy.
Yeah. And I think also one of the things that is central to the bear being so closely related to us humans for some reason is that there is a lot of human likeness.
Yeah.
When one of the things that when you skin a bear, the body underneath the hide looks almost like a human.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty strange, and there's a lot of talk about that also in like bear hunting traditions, and which is why a lot of these myths about the bear actually having a human inside. There is a lot of like folklore about that as well in many places on the earth.
That's fascinating.
But also they cry. They sit and contemplate in the same way as we humans do. They have a similar digestion. So actually, in certain traditions, amongst others, certain Native American tribes, it was seen as the teacher that taught us which plants we could eat and not. So there would be people following the bear to see what plants it was eating. Also, when it was sick or wounded, to learn which ones that we could use. Which is a very fascinating thing as well. So there, I don't know. There has always been this strange kinship between man and bear. I would say, wherever there are bears, you find traces of this.
So fascinating. I mean,
Yeah, really.
obviously, if it's a hunting society, the bear is important for, sustaining life. But I had no idea that like the digestive was similar, and because a lot of animals eat plants that we can't. And so,
Yes.
yeah, just knowing that is fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
And so when in the year do you start at winter solstice at the beginning of the album and go through? Or
we sort of we sort of start at we start with a song called Hertan, meaning the heart. So we sort of, which is almost like an introduction to what is going to happen next. It sort of encompasses the whole story. It takes us through the death and rebirth, and in that state, seeing all of these, seeing clearly all of these movements, these cyclic movements of death and rebirth, etc. Ending with chanting, "I hibernate with bears," and so on. The heart being both the metaphor, of course, for the council of our emotion in a way, or the rudder, the steering wheel of our emotions, but also the physical heart being the pulse that or the pace of everything, of all life. So that is where we start with what sort of governs all of these movements that we are going to follow the bear as part of. And then we go into the title track Birna, which is a dialogue between man and bear, where we it's about reconnecting in a way to the wild, reconnecting and also paying respect in a way. Sort of a playful dialogue, also playing on things we have from folklore, from old songs and verses in terms of what we very often wanted to, what we looked up for the bear, to the bear for, what the skills we wanted to lend. It's very often their strength, or courage, like in battle and so on, or even in hunt. But also their wit, their knowledge. They are seen as teachers. So here in Norway, there is a saying that they have the strength of 12 and the wit of 10 men. So it's sort of this playful dialogue between man and bear. So it's about connection. But then we start at summer solstice, I would say, where we have this luscious feast, which nature or the bear presents us. But then the hostess of the feast, she leaves the party in a way, and leaves us to gather and save during the winter, so we can survive while she is Mother Earth and Mama Bear is sleeping. So so the song "Ljus till jul" or "Light to Earth" or "Light to Womb" is sort of about that movement where everything is moving towards the death or the winter sleep of the world. Not only the bear, but that is the main focus, of course. And then we go into the song called Dvaledraumar, which is the dormant dreams, where we enter the bear's den for the 15-minute long sort of winter sleep, and which is for me sort of the heart of the album, and also speaking of heart, because that is also the starting point at the core, the spine of that song. Bears don't really hibernate per definition. They sort of go into this semi-hibernating state where they lower their heart rate to between 8 and 10 beats per minute. And I chose 9, and 9 beats per minute is the pulse you will hear throughout that whole 15-minute long song. So that is sort of the spine that takes you on the journey of the sleeping bear and its dreams. Before you, towards the end, hear the melting ice, the birds returning, the spring flute being played, and the calling songs are being sung, and then we go from jord till ljus, or earth to light again. So that's when we're coming out of the winter sleep, and nature is awakening again, and sort of back to life. And then we sort of move towards the end of that, into the Himindotter, which means the sky daughter, and the title is sort of playing on this notion that we also find in when it comes to the man-bear relationship. We often have seen them as originally celestial beings coming from the sky, or from the stars, which is perhaps also why you very often find star signs named after bears. We still have them, of course, from the Greek tradition, but they used to be much more. And that is about seeking connection to the wild, to the bear, from a, I would say, a contemporary perspective.
Mm.
Um, the the bear was seen as the shepherd of and the guardian of the woodlands of nature, and today they are, like where I live, they aren't welcome in their own kingdom, so to say. The shepherd is doesn't have her forest anymore, and which is what the song sort of ends with as well. The life is short without breath, and the forest is doomed without its shepherd, and that, of course, when you take out these important species from an ecosystem, it has so many repercussions, so many consequences beyond just that animal, or it affects the plant life. It affects everything. So yeah, and then of course the Hebjorn, the hibernator, is a almost like a lullaby. With just the voice and a plucked instrument. Yeah, there are lullaby, and this is from a lullaby sung from the bear's perspective, in a way, from within the den. And and of course, lullabies are so connected to bears. Also, and lullabies are, if you're interested in old music, some of the music that has sort of been preserved for the longest is lullabies. In a lot of cultures. They sort of stay the same way. They have different variants, but very often they stay the same way. And that's sort of the end of that. Then we move into some other songs, but the sort of the story arc of the album is those 7 first songs.
So you do kind of go through the year, but it also seems like you're weaving spirit and the spirit of the bear, the spirit of man, spirit of the land throughout as well, and sort of what
absolutely
some of the not just as the year goes by, but more of what is the symbolism of the bear hibernating, or what does that, how does that connect with us?
Absolutely. And yeah, I like to write things open-ended, with the distance, but also with space for the listener, in a way. So as you say, there are so many layers of it, and which is, of course, the world is cyclic. We are cyclic beings.
Yep.
And the bear also teaches us a lot of things that's worth noticing, both on a philosophical level, of course, or a spiritual level, but also just like pretty mundane things as well, eat seasonal, eat local, don't have the same tempo in the winter as you have in the summer. You're supposed to take it more easy, but of course our society is not adjusted for that, which is why probably also why there are so much winter depression and people getting ill and stuff like that, because we're not being attuned to the nature of the season.
Right. Yeah.
We're not playing. Yeah, we're not part of it anymore. Where we live our own in our own box, separate from nature, and that of course has repercussions to the cycles we are part of. Even whether we want them or not, we're still part of them, and we're gonna feel them. It's science.
Right.
It's magnetism. It's of course all of this affects everything else on this planet. Why shouldn't it affect us?
Right. Well, they say that, if you don't take time to rest, your body will make you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just the way it goes. And we do forget it. We're expected to produce at exactly the same level, no matter
Yeah.
what is going on around us. And that's
Mm.
crazy.
Yeah, it's unnatural.
Yeah.
Really, it's
Yeah.
unnatural. So yeah, I think there is a lot to learn from contemplating on these movements of nature, also applying them to to our own lives and cycles. There's a lot to learn, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. So I know that you're the main composer, but when you're developing pieces, how does
Mm.
that work? Do you have a general concept? Do you have a finished piece and people, the musicians come together? How does your process work?
So I do most of the composing parts and but yeah, since quite early in the process or in the progress of or history of Wardruna, I've worked a lot with the female singer of the group, Lindy Hella, which is still a very important part of this yeah, of our music. And she, of course, she also have creative input. So sometimes it can be, sometimes I really have a strong idea of what I want her to do, because we've worked so much together that I know yeah, um, yeah, what I also know what I feel she's good at. At the same time, sometimes I just create an open space for her to be creative in, because she has a really unique approach to music, I would say. She has a really um, unique voice as well. And of course she has a her she her heritage is part of her heritage originates from some of the indigenous people here in the north as well, both Kven and Sami. And that is a quality you can clearly hear in her voice as well, this primal sort of texture to it, which is so absolutely fantastic to be allowed to work with. She's a force of nature. What can I say?
That's great.
So sometimes it's just to create an open space, and that can be the starting point of certain things that we sort of weave we continue, or we sort of have that as the spine that or the seed that we work from, and sometimes the other way around. So and then of course the other musicians have quite a few of them. They've been playing with us predominantly live on when we perform in front of an audience. But I also want them. They also do certain things on the album. Um, um, so I don't know if you want me to be more specific about
No,
those things and elements.
I think that what I'd like to really hear about is you talked earlier about the instruments that you're using and
Mm,
that you had to create some of them you had to have built, and they're based on older instruments.
yeah.
When people are coming to see your show or they're listening to your music, what are those instruments like as opposed to more modern instruments?
Well, in many cases they are quite like modern instruments, but they are earlier versions of it. Sometimes so they are um, perhaps more primitive, like um, but certain instruments there is a living tradition of using,
Hmm.
like the big horns, the lure, or the bronze lure, which is the oldest versions of them that we use, like huge horns that always come in pairs. Which the oldest version archaeological finding of this instrument is from they are about 3,000 years old, and this is an instrument type that we have a living tradition of using. So and it's an instrument that is it's very much locked to the harmonic scale. So it would be the range would be, people would perhaps recognize it most as like the military trumpet, those kind of tonalities, and that's what they always also was used for, apart from ritual use, of course, but they were used to communicate over distances, as basically as means of communication. Also, we use goat horns and cow horns, but with playing holes, which is also an instrument that there is a living tradition of using from the oldest archaeological finding we have of one of those type of horns is from 400 BC. Wow. And that is instruments that, well, examinations of these archaeological findings have showed us that the tonality hasn't really changed much to the ones we have from like early, from 100 years back or something like that, which of course we have a lot of material, and they are very much suited for playing like lullabies and things like that we still have in our repertoire in a way. So they can tell us quite a lot about a tradition going really far back. Then of course we use we use a lyre, or several types of lyre, which is a small harp. With the Germanic lyre, I often have 6 strings. I also use 7-string lyres. That is like a small harp. This is an instrument type that we see. It's many thousand years old. We had them in ancient Greece or Persia, Egypt. And in northern Europe, it would be the most common string instrument in, for instance, the Viking period. And then we also use bowed instruments, but we mostly use like, it would be like the great grandfather of the violin or the fiddle, where the strings, it's called tagelharpa, which means horsehair harp or fiddle. So the strings are made of horsehair that is just spun in a way, or twined. And then you play it the same way you play any other bowed instrument, but you don't have like a fingerboard pressing down the strings. You just touch the strings, similar to certain bowed instrument that we see more common in the East, like in Asia and Siberia, China, Mongolia, etc. And of course many overtone flutes, bone flutes, those kind of instruments. In our music, of course, with Wardruna, I put them into a contemporary soundscape, in a way. So I take and sample sounds from all of these instruments, and I process them in a modern way to make like these also very like ambient sounds, and more making it the sound bigger in a way. So that combination of that, and of course I use a lot of percussion, skin, deer hide drums or from rawhide, yeah, so that's a little bit about the instruments. And then of course poetry, the going into using elements from the oldest song traditions we have here in the north as well is an important factor for a music, what we gather our inspiration from. And
Well, and
yeah,
that's, how we tell our stories, right?
yeah,
And that's getting back to the whole bardic idea of,
yeah,
sharing those stories and sharing the culture.
yeah. And you always need, I think, like, to sell a story, you need a contemporary bridge
Sure.
in a way. Whether it's you're telling a joke, you need some sort of reference that makes people understand it.
Right.
And I guess it's the same with music, the music we create. I think that we need that. Part of why it has our music has a broad appeal is because it has that contemporary bridge to the past. It is things that is really deeply rooted and ancient and timeless even, but it's put into a contemporary context that makes it more accessible for people to connect to it today.
Right.
If I was to do like a proper song, like a song would be sung a few hundred years back, it would have perhaps 100 verses, and and people, and it would take the whole night to go through it, and people don't have the attention span. So
Right.
so we have to approach it in a different way, or that's at least how we do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. There are universal truths, but we also live in the world we live in. And, we don't, we have Netflix, and we're not going to go sit for, hours and hours and hours and just have that be our entertainment, because we have so much pulling at us right now.
Yeah. The tempo is yeah. We don't have we cannot relate to our surroundings in that way. We don't have time for it,
Right.
most of us.
But that's one of the nice things about going to live music, is you do stop and make the time for it. And that's,
Mm.
it's a whole different energy to be sitting in a concert, be there having that experience with the musicians, with the other audience members. And that, brings it's a whole different kind of layer to, the already multi-layered music that you have.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah. The live taking this music stage is of course a completely different beast, and yeah, performing is about becoming one with your surroundings,
Right.
and the sounds you're part of, and the words you're expressing, and connecting with the people in front of you. It's about communication and presence. um, and it's a very powerful, humbling process, I would say. Uh, yeah, which I'm really grateful for the opportunity to travel the world, perform in these wonderful places in front of people who have this very often deep personal connection to our songs. That is a very it's a very powerful um, friction in a way, that you're a part of, one that I can't really get used to, and one that I'm very humbling is perhaps, it makes me really humble to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, your fans are certainly passionate.
That's absolutely true. But so are we. It's that's also
Yeah, and
it
that's part of it.
for me the perhaps the most important thing when I create is that it has to come from somewhere that is real.
Yeah.
Like I said, I create the songs I want to hear. I create music for myself, and then if it resonates with other people, that's a bonus. But
Uh-huh.
for me, it has to come from somewhere that is real,
Sure.
without restraint or rules or anything. Yeah,
Well, clearly it is resonating with people, and it has
yeah.
been for quite some time. So that's good. So where can people find you if they want to find your music, if they want to find what your dates for performances are?
Well, then the easiest thing is to visit Wardruna.com. If it, also if I think in the world of horrible algorithms and politics and all of those things, I encourage people to go and sign up for our newsletter. If you want to, and we're not spamming people. We only post max once a month if there are like really important things going on.
Sure.
That so I encourage people to do that. Apart from it, we have our own web shop that you can find from there. There are of course links to our social media platforms. You can stream our music from on all the major streaming services, of course. Yeah, so if people are curious, feel free. You're most welcome
Great.
to join the family.
So is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners before we wrap it up?
Oh, I feel this has been a really good conversation, and we've talked a lot about many different things, and we've even gone pretty nerdy into some details here and there as well. So no, I'm just I hope it piqued the curiosity if you weren't familiar with our work. You're always welcome to do so. And so thank you for having me, and thanks to the people for listening.
Thank you for taking the time.
Head over to the episode page for this episode on the Folklore Podcast website, and you'll get direct links to Einar's work. My thanks to him for coming back onto the podcast, and to Tracy for the interview. Now, the ongoing release of weekly episodes for the 10th anniversary season of the podcast continues, and I'll even be throwing in some short midweek bonus pieces over the coming weeks as well. The anniversary is certainly turning out to be a celebration of all things folklore, and I hope that you're enjoying it. It is, I confess, pretty hard work with at least double the content of the previous years, but as you can see, I haven't quite keeled over just yet. Now, if you do find value in the podcast and in my other content, please consider giving a little support. You can make a one-off donation on the Folklore Podcast website, or you can join the Patreon page at patreon.com/thefolklorepodcast, where you'll get extra content too. And don't forget that there is a free tier there as well now for those who need it. Whatever you do, and however you engage with the show, thank you. And I hope to see you back again here next week, when we'll be looking at an exciting new folklore and folk horror themed gaming experience. See you next time.